Welcome to the NICU Today podcast, a podcast to give families a new point of support as they navigate the NICU journey. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast and share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. Welcome back to the NICU Today podcast. Our guest today is Colette Acker. Colette is the co-founder and executive director of the Breastfeeding Resource Center, the BRC, a nonprofit organization that opened its doors in 2003. Initially, the center provided services by international board-certified lactation consultants on a sliding scale of payment to ensure greater accessibility. Over the years, Colette has expanded the BRC's offerings, introducing support groups, parent classes, and an internship program for aspiring board-certified lactation consultants. Additionally, the BRC is the primary provider of lactation services at 2 local Philadelphia area hospitals. Colette resides in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, with her aging parents and her husband of 34 years. Together, they have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. Welcome to the NICU Today podcast, Colette. We're so happy to have you with us.
I am happy to be here, Martha.
So where did the idea for the Breastfeeding Resource Center come from? Tell us how the organization's evolved over the years. Just tell us where it all began.
Sure. I believe it was back in 1998 that a colleague and friend of I were driving home from a lactation meeting. And she was getting her master's degree in public health, and her final project was starting a breastfeeding center. And I'm listening to her and I'm like, we should do this. And the goal of this center was, it was a nonprofit organization, and it would provide our services on a sliding scale of payment so that it was accessible for everyone. And at that point in time, insurance did not cover visits with a lactation consultant after you left the hospital. So everyone was paying out of pocket. So even with the sliding scale, coming multiple times could be difficult for some families. And you know, we tried to raise money. I know you do such a great job of raising money, but you know, like babies in the NICU, boy, your heartstrings are pulled. When it comes to breastfeeding, people are like, well, that's nice. And so it's a little harder to pull in the money unless you've experienced it and have the passion for it. So we struggled for many years, but after the Affordable Care Act started, it states that insurance should cover lactation counseling. It's kind of vague. And some insurance companies jumped on board, but others didn't. And for those families, we kept our sliding scale of payment. Little by little, as the years have gone by, we've been able to raise enough money that the few that still don't cover, we provide the services free so that the service is equitable across the board. And interestingly enough, the one insurance that does not cover lactation care is Medicaid. So the most vulnerable population can't access the care of an international board certified lactation consultant. And so with what we call the Holly program, they can have as many visits as they want for free. And, you know, when we started the BRC, that's all we were doing were lactation visits. And we wanted to create more of a village for families so that it wasn't just, oh, I saw you a couple of times and I never see you again. So we started offering support groups and parent classes, and they were so much fun, and the parents really enjoyed getting together. You know, you make lifelong friends when you go to these support group meetings. In fact, one of my employees, she's an employee now, but she's been a friend since we met in support group. So, and that was 33 years ago. So it's a long time. But as time went on, they were getting bigger and bigger, and we needed more space to accommodate people. So we moved, and then we had to expand within that building as more families started coming. The support groups, we used to have 25 mothers, 25 babies, 25 car seats, all coming in at the same time. After the pandemic hit, things have changed. It's a little more
Sure.
difficult. People don't want to get together, but we do offer them virtually. So we have a weekly support group meeting. We have a back to work support group meeting. We have a BIPOC support group meeting. We really still have a village for these families, even if they're virtual.
Can you go back a little bit, just talking about insurance that doesn't cover the lactation, the appointments and the consulting appointments, after you're out of the hospital and come home. Tell us a little bit more about the Holly program, where families and listeners might be able to learn more about that if they're trying to access services. And you're based out of the Philadelphia region.
Correct.
Can families access these services now that they're virtual if they're in another part of the country?
Absolutely. We'll start with that.
Great.
Now many insurance companies still cover virtual visits, so we can do those. It's a little difficult doing a virtual visit if we're working on latching a baby, but for things like returning to work or situations where families have babies in the NICU, that's something that we can do virtually to discuss, milk production and things like that. Um, so besides our outpatient office in Abington, we've expanded to kind of meet the needs in a wider area by offering home visits outside of our area of where our office is. We can't do the home visits in our area. We're so busy. We have 3 full-time lactation consultants there every day, and they're doing about 5 consults each, and each consult takes an hour and a half. So they're very busy, and you can't do 5 home visits in a day, or
Mhm.
10, you just never would be home.
Yes.
So, but outside of that, we're covering a good part of southeastern Pennsylvania now, and we still have that access to the Holly program. So the Holly program is the program where if your insurance company covers it, great, we'll get that money. If your insurance company doesn't, the money that we raise through the Holly program covers that visit.
Can parents who are interested in taking advantage of that just reach out to the BRC to learn more about it if
Oh, yeah.
there's
They
opportunities?
Yeah, they can call the office to make appointments. They can book online.
Great.
There are options.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the NICU. Today is a good day. Our mission is to provide support for families who experience the NICU. I remember as soon as Claire and Mary were born, they said, you have to start pumping. This is really important. This is liquid gold for your daughters. You need to pump. Why is pumping so important early on in the NICU?
Yeah, so I mean, human milk for human babies is very important, especially for premature babies who are far more vulnerable. And so we are mammals, and each mammal makes a specific milk for their babies. And it's designed specifically for their babies. The mother whale has a high fat content because her babies have to swim in freezing cold water. And each one has a different kind of slant to it to help their babies. Ours gives gut health, brain health, and the nervous system. So it's really, and the immune system, it's really aiming towards the gut, to be honest with you. And because we know so much about gut health these days, a lot of it stems from that. So getting human milk into premature babies is, you are part of the healthcare team. And that is why the NICUs in the United States purchase donor milk from human milk banks to ensure that premature babies, if the parent is struggling to get milk supply going, that they have access to human milk.
Yes, it's so important and such a change. I mean, we were in the NICU over 13 years ago, and that opportunity was not there for us as it is available now in so many hospitals. So it's just such an improvement. It's so exciting to see all the changes over the years, I would say, to help support these babies in the NICU. Now, for us, our daughters were born at 23 weeks and 5 days. Obviously, they were on IV nutrients, and they were not drinking breast milk at the time when they were born so prematurely. But what can parents expect in the first few days after they pump?
Yeah. So the thing is, and sometimes that type of situation um, works better for milk production because we don't need your milk immediately. And so it gives the parent a few days to get things going. And that's what happens is we ask you to start pumping immediately. And the goal of the pumping right from the beginning and the frequency of the pumping plan is based on how newborns feed. So we need to trick your body into thinking that the baby's doing its job. And so it's really difficult to manage that frequency, but it's super important because, especially in the first 2 weeks, your pumping plan really sets the tone for your milk production.
And can you tell us a little bit about I remember early on the nurses would put just a touch of breast milk on a Q-tip, and I believe they called it oral care. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. That's one of the greatest things. A lot of that work was studied by Diane Spatz right here in Philadelphia at CHOP. Um, so and I think it's really helpful for the parents when they're expressing their milk in the early days and they see 3 drops. You feel horrible. You're just like, this isn't working. Why am I doing this every 2 to 3 hours? And then you say, oh, you've got a few drops. This is great. Let's get a Q-tip. We wipe it in the milk, and then you put it in the baby's buccal pads or in their cheeks. And they really absorb the nutrients of the colostrum, which gives them a head start.
You were sharing about how stressful it can be when you get just 3 drops. I was that mom who just got a couple of drops early on, and it was very stressful, I remember. What advice do you have for parents like me who may be having some challenges getting a little bit of milk and they just feel so frustrated and they feel like they're failing after they just had a baby who may be premature or full term, who's spending time in the NICU? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it's super stressful. The key thing that I try to teach new parents is not only using that hospital grade electric pump, but teaching them hand expression. So, hand expression in conjunction with using that hospital grade pump can have a huge impact on milk supply later on. So, it's much easier to obtain small amounts of colostrum when you use hand expression. And so that is vital when you're exclusively pumping for a baby in the NICU. And so if you're able to use the pump, maybe get a few drops, then add in hand expression into that mix and get a few more, it's really important to try to encourage the parent and tell them this is normal for the
Mhm.
first few days and it's going to change. Usually between day 3 and 5 we see an increase in milk production.
And are there some ways to really build that connection when you go home? You go home after potentially a day or 2 or 3 days, depending on how you delivered. So then you're going home without your baby. Your baby's still in the NICU. It's stressful. What are some ways that you can kind of have that emotional connection and maybe help to build more of that milk production?
Yeah, it's so hard. You see people going home with the babies and their balloons and all the happiness, and you're going home with empty arms. So I really, try to stress that to keep in mind that you are part of the healthcare team and that your job is really important and that this is your way, one small way to connect with your baby, that your job is just as important as all of that stuff being put in them, all the tubes and bells and whistles that you see, that this part is important too. um and then how to connect with them. There's things we do like looking at pictures of the baby while you're expressing milk, having a blanket that they, had around them to have their smell. I mean, we are looking for oxytocin release, and oxytocin is the mothering hormone. Putting your nipples into plastic things that are plugged into the wall and they're yanking them doesn't elicit oxytocin flow. We want the warm and fuzzy. So, how do we get that warm, fuzzy feeling while you're doing this? And so, some people just like try to distract themselves and listen to NICU Today's podcast
There you go.
or listen to a book, an audio book, or watch a show, or just try and do something else so your body can kind of relax. Um, and then one of the things I know you guys do, which is so great in your NICU bags, why don't you explain that part?
Yes, yes, we have the bonding squares, which are so nice for families to take home with them. There are two in each of our care packages. One is placed with the baby and one is with the parents. And then at night when the parents go home, they can switch them so that the babies have the parent scent and the parents have the baby scent. And again, it's just like the blanket. It's just kind of making that connection to help improve milk production for sure.
Yeah, and some other things that people can do is like I strongly feel that a pumping plan is important for a family. One, I think a day-to-day plan is good for you when you're in a situation where you feel helpless, and sleep is important. And so I really try to develop a pumping plan where the parent will get two good chunks of sleep because they still need to wake up in the middle of the night and express their milk. And sitting there for 15 minutes is not that hard to do, but putting the pump part pieces together, washing the pump part pieces, getting the milk stored, all of that makes the whole thing much longer. So parents can buy several pumping kits if they have the finances to do that. So they're not washing it every time because that's the last thing you want to be doing in the middle of the night. And being understanding what the storage guidelines are of the milk so that if you're pumping at 3 o'clock in the morning, you may not have to run it downstairs and put it in the refrigerator until 6 when you wake up. It's good at room temperature for up to 4 hours. So little things like that
Mhm.
can make it a little more doable. And I sometimes joke around with families like, I Reese's peanut butter cups is my downfall, and, if I put 8 of those on my pump and I get one every time I pump, I may be more likely to head over there
Oh, I love that idea of giving yourself kind of a reward for
for
pumping and following through with that. Well, and there are so many different I remember well, let me step back a minute. I remember in the NICU, I was handed a pump and they said, "Here you go do this." Now there are, as you were talking about, the hand pumps, but there's also sizing, right? To make sure that you are able to get the most milk, which I do not remember talking about back then. So it may have been available. I don't remember asking the questions. It was an overwhelming time. But can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely, that's the hot topic in the breastfeeding world, pumping world, is getting the right flange size. So, yeah, I've been in this business for a while. So back in 1998, we had maybe 3 sizes. And typically breast pumps come with a 24 millimeter sized breast shield, and that's the part that you put your nipple into. And typically, we were always getting bigger ones for parents, thinking it had to be bigger, that the 24 was standard. And they did have, I remember Medela had a 21, and I'm like, this is crazy. Who would ever even try that? I never even pulled it out. But now we are seeing, and there hasn't been a lot of research. It's sort of people are trying this and it seems to be working. We're having a new way to fit parents into their breast shield size, and we want it closer to the base of the nipple. So if you think about your own nipple size, 27 millimeters may be way too huge and taking in some of the breast tissue. And that's what we were taught, that we wanted the nipple and some of the areola being pulled into the breast shield. But now we're seeing when we go smaller, that some parents, the milk just starts flowing like crazy. So when you told me that you struggled with milk production, and that was 13 years ago, you know, we did not know what we know now. And I remember saying to parents, that struggled with that. Well, some people just don't respond to these hospital grade breast pumps. I had no answer for them
Right.
why there was no milk coming out. They have no history of an inability to produce milk, yet we can't get this milk out. So sizing is really important, and that's something that we do at our office. And not all lactation consultants are equipped to do this, because let me tell you, to buy one pack of all the variety of different sizes is about 65 bucks. So, and um I have 15 lactation consultants. So you take 15 times $65. It's a lot of money to spend. But what we do is you can size the parent, you can eye it up first of all, and there are ways that you can size it. There's tools that you can purchase. There's tools on the internet where you're cutting out circles to seeing where your nipple fits, but truly is trying the size and seeing if it works is the best way. So we have all these sizes. We try them with you and see which one the milk comes flying out with. And then, we sterilize that equipment for the next family.
Well, two questions. So, can you size at home? I heard you say you could go online, cut paper out, or do something, or potentially purchase something to figure out what your size is. Second question is, when you figure out your size, where do you get that size? Do you ask your hospital? Do you have to order it?
No, this would be something that you have to order on your own. And because, like, let's say you're using a Spectra, a lot of people are using the Spectra pump nowadays. They have a variety of sizes, but you might be in between one of those. So there are companies who are making these in between sizes that will fit that pump. So you have to do your homework. And that's the other thing that we know is like where you find which size, what company makes that size, etc.
And so it would be potentially looking on your own online. I'm sure you could probably ask the lactation consultant at the hospital as well, or your team would help guide people on where they could get those different sizes.
Yeah, I think that outpatient lactation consultants are a little more well versed about this type of stuff, because we deal with pumping families after their discharge, where in many cases, you may work with a few in the NICU, but we have a little bit more experience in that area.
I want to go back to the NICU here for a minute. When families are in the NICU, how can they advocate for themselves to support their pumping plan, their milk production plan? What do you advise?
Yeah. And years ago, it was more about just get us the milk, get us the milk, get us the milk, where now NICUs are really concentrating on helping parents getting breastfeeding somewhat established before the baby's discharged from the NICU. Because having a baby come home and you're exclusively pumping and you're trying to figure out the breastfeeding, it is no easy task, that's for sure. So there are steps put in place in a NICU setting that can help a parent reach that goal and help you bond with your baby too. The biggest one is skin to skin contact and doing, or they call it kangaroo care sometimes in a NICU setting. And that's where you take off your shirt, the baby's naked, get the baby on your chest, blankets over you both, and hang out together. This helps on the mother's side, helps with hormones. Guess what? That's where the oxytocin comes when your sweet baby is snuggled up to you, skin to skin. And because of those hormones, you have it helps with your milk production. So we even see families who do skin to skin, and then after they're finished, do a pumping session, and they may see more milk than they've ever gotten before, because of the prolactin and oxytocin coursing through their bodies doing that skin to skin. On the other hand, skin to skin is wonderful. It's the easiest thing to help your baby's health. It stabilizes the baby's heart rate. It stabilizes their respiratory rate. It keeps them warmer than any incubator that they can make. No matter how much it costs, your body works way better. And one of the cool things about a mother's body is that when a baby is there, if she starts getting too hot, her body temperature will go down to cool the baby a little bit. The dads don't have that. They just get hotter and hotter. But the moms do have that. It's still wonderful for dads to do skin to skin but it's just so good for their brain development too. So it's a win-win, and it's such a low tech thing that you can do in a NICU setting. That's step one, is get that skin to skin going.
Well, and how do you ask the team, for those moms that might want to breastfeed, how do you ask the team, the medical team, about transitioning from pumping to saying, hey, is it time now? Can I try to work with the baby on latching? What's that process look like?
Yeah. So the first step is that when let's say they're being tube fed, so they're not feeding by mouth, they're MPO, what they call MPO. When that's happening, when they get their feeding through the tube, I encourage the parents to ask to put the baby near the breast, just so they start associating a full tummy with being near the breast. Something as simple as that. So that anytime parents are visiting to try and do that step is really important to help with the association. If the baby's able to start sucking on a pacifier, that would be a time where we would want them to use the parent as the pacifier. And so in those cases, you express your milk first and then have the baby latch and use you as a pacifier just to help them learn the sucking technique, because it's different than actually feeding from a bottle or sucking on a pacifier. And then when the baby starts to feed by mouth, I mean, the parent shouldn't have to advocate for that. The healthcare professionals should be jumping in and encouraging them to practice. And even putting the baby near the breast and having them lick the breast, that's breastfeeding for for that day. That's okay. It doesn't have to mean that the baby latches and gets all the food that they need for that feeding. It's going to be a transition, and we want to really praise these little steps that they make. There's also tools in the NICU setting like scales, and if that's something that I use in outpatient world all the time. And what they do is they're very intricate, and they can measure the baby's intake at the breast. So you weigh the baby, you feed the baby, weigh the baby again. And this gives you an idea of how well the baby's doing. This will let you know if you need to supplement the baby with more food. This will also let you know if you don't need to supplement the baby. So I've heard some nurses and NICU staff say, oh, I don't like to use those. That stresses the mom out, because if the baby doesn't do well, it makes them feel bad. And I'm like, no, it gives them the information they need, because if you send them home and it's a big guessing game for them, they're going to go crazy. So when you have a baby in the NICU, they're talking mLs, they're talking cc's, they're talking numbers left and right. And then you're supposed to go home and just like, well, go by your gut. It's not an easy transition for most people. So I love the technology of pre and post feed weight checks for that situation to make that transition, and make it in a way that's not going to hurt the baby, so they get adequately fed, and gives moms confidence as things change, or gives her information that I need to go see someone and get some more help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to talk to you a little bit about loss. So, when a family's going through, and I'll use our personal experience, but our fourth child, our son William, was diagnosed with trisomy 18 at 14 weeks gestation. We knew he was going to pass away after he was born, carried him until 34 weeks, and delivered him. He was with us a little over an hour and a half. But my milk came in. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, it was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
I remember shivers. I remember just not feeling well. I was trying to figure out how to navigate through that time period. of having the milk come in and trying to move through that process. But what do you have? What types of advice do you have for parents who are just trying to move through that process in the easiest way? It's not easy at all, but in the easiest way, what can you do to comfort and um, try to get through that? But also for parents who want to donate their breast milk, and how that may be the way that they honor their child is by pumping and donating. I know a friend who did that for, I believe, a year after her son was born, and he had passed away, but she donated. So I just wanted to ask your advice on those two situations.
Yeah, and let me say how sorry I am for your loss. I
Thank you.
I think this doing all the work that you're doing now is probably helps you, but you have been through it, and I think you're an amazing person.
Oh,
Just to say
nice
that.
of you to say, Colette.
Um, yeah, I remember a friend of mine who had a miscarriage, and she was, devastated, obviously. And then the milk came in. She called me and she's like, "This is like another slap in the face." And I'm like, I can only imagine. So, yeah, warning parents that this is going to happen is important, and making sure they have the information before it happens. It's not like a shock. I didn't know this was going to happen. So that's number one that I think is really important. And many hospitals do a great job of informing parents of that. Are you hearing it? Who knows? Can you take in that information after you lose a child? Who knows what information you're able to pull in. But if you want to wean and get rid of the milk as soon as possible, cold compresses, ice compresses really help to reduce the swelling. And the way the milk production works, when you take milk out, you make more. When you take milk out, you make more. So it's that simple economic principle of supply and demand, that we need to not have any demand, so the supply goes down. But you can be uncomfortably full. So taking out small amounts, I usually encourage people, like when the breasts are so uncomfortable and you're really feeling uncomfortable, try to take maybe an ounce out and see. Don't drain the breast completely. You'll feel a lot better, but it's just going to keep the process going. So taking small amounts until the milk supply dries up.
That
Um,
that's really good advice, though, and I don't think that I did that. I remember the cold compresses. My good dad, he would just go out to the store, get frozen bags of everything, all kinds of ice packs and everything for me. It was such a difficult time for us, and, um, but I don't think I did that small amounts, and I think that's such good advice because you knew that if you did too much, it would just keep coming back, and I was trying to wean through that process.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
thank you for that.
so frozen peas conform nicely to the breast, and, there's also, like, binding the breast is sometimes helpful, although, I have experienced parents who've had plug ducts when that's happened, so that's kind of more pain, and you have to take the milk out to work the plug ducts out. So, sometimes if you just manage it, it might take a little longer, process by just draining a little bit at a time.
And then how about donating milk? If that's a way that, someone wants to honor their baby.
Yeah. Um, it's so wonderful when I hear people wanna do that. It's just they feel like this is their gift to another baby in the NICU or family, in hopes to help them. And so you can get linked up with a milk bank. Our area, we tend to use Mid-Atlantic Milk Bank in Pittsburgh, but you can Google and find a milk bank close to you. They're going to interview you and make sure you're not taking any medication and other things to make sure the milk is good. But they give you everything you need for your pumping needs and transporting the milk to them. So milk banks then just take that milk, test it, pasteurize it, and then sell it to hospitals for babies in need. So
And
yeah,
there's also a company, Prolacto Bioscience, who creates the human milk fortifier. They have donors who help to support their work as well.
you are absolutely right. Yes. So some babies, the just human milk alone is not enough for them. They need some things added to it. And previously, we'd had to go to formula companies to get that added. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Fortifier.
Fortifier. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But now they're making it from human milk, which is great.
Hmm. Yeah, so they have some donation opportunities through companies like Prolacta as well that may be worth looking into. So I just really have one more question for you, maybe two, but tell us what your why is. What's your why? What keeps you going every day, Colette?
Keeps me going every day. Well, it's so funny because every time I look at a new parent, I remember the feelings of fear, insecurities, the fear of the unknown, and just, some of them walk in pretty with smiles on their faces. Others look like deer caught in headlights. And it's like, I'll take care of you during this very short portion of your parenting time. But it's such a vulnerable time for families. The first year of your child's life. And so I have such passion for them that I want to keep going.
I love it. Thank you for what you do. And anything else you want to share with our listeners?
No, well, if you need to reach out for breastfeeding help, we're at breastfeedingresourcecenter.org. If you're passionate about supporting our mission, you can look into all of our programs there.
Wonderful. And again, we just spoke with Colette Acker, Executive Director and founder of the Breastfeeding Resource Center. What a great conversation. Thank you for all the advice. And thanks for being on the NICU Today podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the NICU Today podcast, brought to you by Today is a Good Day. Learn more at todayisagoodday.org.